Meaning in life is the stick that is hitting you from behind, and purpose is the carrot that you chase in front of you. Only when both meaning and purpose, the carrot and the stick, push and pull, disappear from life, can there truly exist freedom. My name is Satvik, and you're watching The Thinking Clown. Now, what is freedom? Other than America. What is freedom? Why freedom? Because I believe that people desire freedom more than they desire happiness. So what is freedom? Now, if you were to take any Hindu, Buddhist, Jain or Sikh philosophy, moksha, nirvana, mukti or liberation is the highest purpose of life. Now, from liberation comes vairagyam or desirelessness. And this is freedom. When every moment is no different from the one before or the one after. There is a lightness in all actions. There is an equanimity in all actions, wherein you essentially flow from one place to the next. The push and pull of life doesn't push and pull you as much. Instead, you flow from one moment to the next because there's an equanimity, there is a unity in all movements, in all moments. So the dualities of good and bad, push and pull, happiness and unhappiness, no longer push and pull you as fiercely. This is freedom. It is also realizing that you are pure consciousness. But why consciousness? Now, this is going to sound a little hippie, so bear with me, because I believe that consciousness is the building blocks to the entire universe. But first we have to understand what is consciousness. And the entire argument will come back around. It'll wrap around, it won't be stupid. Yeah, it won't be stupid. Okay, so we begin first with a general inquiry to who am I? Because we have to understand what is consciousness first. To understand what is consciousness, we begin with the general inquiry of who am I? Am I the things that I see, the perceptions that I have? Right? Am I the door that I see? Am I the computer that I see, or the phone that I see? Am I my feelings of anger, sadness, joy, hunger, pain? Am I my thoughts of one form or the other? Who am I? Now, to understand who I am, because am I those things, or am I something inside that is seeing those things? Now, imagine an apple. Imagine an apple in your hand. The apple is the object. The eyes are the observer. Observer, object. The observer is observing the object. Now, if you were to go one step back, you could say that the eyes are the object. Like the apple being seen by the eyes are being seen by the brain. The brain is the observer. The brain is like the eyes looking at the apple. The brain is looking at the eyes. So the brain is the object. The brain is the observer and the eyes are the object. So the brain is looking at the eyes. What if you went one step back? The brain becomes the object. If the brain is the object, the mind is observing it. So the mind becomes the observer and the brain becomes the object. What if you went one step further back? If the mind is the object, what is observing it? If the mind is the object, what observes it? What is the observer? Consciousness. If you were to take away everything, if you kept going back, what do you get? What is that thing that almost gives you that subjective experience of everything? If you took away all five senses and your thoughts, what is left? Neti, not this. You keep going back, not this. What do you get at the center of it all? What is that thing at the center that gives you that first person experience of everything? For example, you look at something that is red. What is that thing that makes it feel red? Right? It is consciousness. Yeah, there's consciousness. Now you could argue and say that when you see something, neurons in the brain fire up and you see colors. But how does something physical, a physical entity like the brain, just as physical as this table right here, just as physical as the table, how does it create that subjective experience of something? Now this is called the hard problem of consciousness, proposed by David Chalmers. Now you could again argue that evolution needed it and that consciousness, like any other faculty, exists somewhere inside the brain. But if you were to take evolution, then you also take the materialistic perspective, the view that we are just lucky byproducts of random particles that collide into one another, and we ended up being formed because of that. Random collisions, right? Essentially, by that logic, we are robots, and that we do not have free will. That none of the things that I'm saying right now is because I decided to. Now, I don't believe that we have free will, but that's for another day. But if that is the perspective, right, of evolution, what is the point of me feeling that subjective experience sitting on a roller coaster that I have no control over? If I have no free will, meaning whatever the universe, the beginning of the universe determined, is happening right now, and whatever is going to happen towards the end will happen almost linearly. There is no way I can ever change it. There is no me to change it. Why should I be there on a roller coaster that will go loop-de-loop or anywhere, however it likes, if I can't do anything about it? What's the point of evolution putting me on that seat? And that is why I believe that consciousness is at the center of who we are, and also at the center of the entire universe. But why the entire universe? Now, why the entire universe? Because if you take, say, a Hindu philosophy of Sankhya, Prakriti and Purusha are separate. Prakriti is the material world, or what you see around you, and Purusha is consciousness. So nature, the material world, and Purusha, these two things are separate. Consciousness, that subjective experience, and the objective world, the material, these two things are separate, and they almost sort of interweave into one another. Right? These two things are separate. This is called Advaita, or dualism. So they are two separate entities that interact with one another. But I believe in Advaita, which is non-dualism, which essentially suggests that there is only consciousness, only Purusha. That Prakriti is a manifestation of Purusha. That it's purely a manifest, that the entire material world is a manifestation of. It's not that the material world does not exist. It's not that kind of an illusion. This is Maya, which is an illusion or a cosmic dream or a veil of ignorance. But it's not necessarily that it's not there, but rather that from consciousness emerges everything else. Yeah, and so the true nature, so Maya being the veil of ignorance of what? Of the true nature being consciousness. Now, why would I believe that everything comes from one thing? From consciousness, everything else emerges. Because if you were to look at the world around you, economics is applied biology, biology is applied chemistry, and chemistry is applied physics. You take everything around you, you can break it down, mixtures into compounds and compounds into its constituent elements. Different elements of different density, but all of them are made up of the same three subatomic particles: electrons, protons, and neutrons. And if you were to break them down further, you get smaller particles, neutrinos, quarks, stuff like that. And I would suspect that if you kept breaking them down, you'd come to one thing. Call it string, call it consciousness, whatever. Now, the reason why I use consciousness, even though it's a little hippie even for my taste, is that it creates a certain logical consistency. Otherwise, like, there is a certain logical consistency in the arguments that I'll make henceforth. So the entire thing wraps around. Otherwise, consciousness is a little this thing. So at least within the thing, that within the structure of this particular argument, there wouldn't be a logical fallacy. So for the sake of the argument, there is this sort of a structure. But other than that, you can take each part of these things and break it all down. But for the argument, in one argument, there is some, at least, preventing any loopholes within the same argument. That's why consciousness is being thrown in. Otherwise, even consciousness is a little, it's not as scientific as I'd like it to be, but maybe that's just how things are. Anyways, so like the water in a wave is no different from the water in the rest of the ocean. The chair and the table, the bird and the bees, the clouds and the trees, they might appear different, but they all come from the same thing: consciousness. Therefore, tat tvam asi, or thou art that, you are it, that you are consciousness, and so is everything else. Now, in order to understand it, a poem by a Hindu philosopher, Adi Shankarcharya, a poem called Nirvana Shatakam, explains this idea of Advaita, or non-dualism. Now, I'll only be taking the first and the last stanza of it, but the general ideas should be understood. Essentially, consciousness is what is left when everything else is taken away, or is essentially everything. Freedom is realizing that you are consciousness. But why would freedom be the realization that you are consciousness? Now, to understand that, we'll try to relate meditation and a chemistry experiment. In any closed system like a chemistry experiment, after a while, equilibrium is attained. Equilibrium is a point where there is no movement of particles, except the natural random movement of particles in Brownian motion. If that same experiment had fewer variables in that closed system, equilibrium or non-movement would occur much more quickly. Now, in that same manner, meditation, for example, we as biological creatures, we are essentially chemistry experiments. We are essentially a chemical factory. So, if by the same logic of taking a normal chemistry experiment that you would have done in a lab, and you take it on yourself, if you were to do meditation, say you were to meditate, for example, it's like that chemistry experiment. If you were to reduce the number of variables, right? When you're meditating, what do? You focus on the tip of your nose, with whatever the breath that is coming in at the tip of your nose, right? You block out the entire ears, you block out the eyes. When you block out the eyes, for example, everything that relates to the eyes, right? All the brain regions, visual cortex and whatever it is, all of those things, at least it doesn't activate as much. The ears as well. If you focus only on your breath and you forget about every other thing, forget about your own imagination, about your your rumination, all of those things. It's almost as though you're reducing the number of variables within this particular chemical experiment or chemistry experiment or chemical factory. And you would assume that if you, like a normal chemistry experiment that you would do in a lab, if you reduce the number of variables, you come to a point of equilibrium much more quickly. And this equilibrium is freedom. The chemistry experiment of the body moves to equilibrium, and there is overall non-movement in the system, and that is freedom. The dualities or the multiplicities of Maya or the illusion of nature disappears, and that only one non-moving state exists, and that is the truth or reality or consciousness. Now, why consciousness? I'll get to that little whiles later. Before that, I need to put in another thing. So the entire universe, for example, the entire universe is like that chemistry experiment. It, like in a chemistry experiment, just like in a chemistry experiment, energy goes from a point of high energy to low energy. If you were to put a cup of hot water outside on the table, the energy would dissipate from the hot water to the surroundings, not the other way around, right? And there is a point where it stops. It stops when the temperature of the water reaches the temperature of the surroundings. Equilibrium is attained when energy is dissipated and the two environment, the cup and the water in the cup and the closed system around it, it matches and equilibrium is attained. Now, what does equilibrium in the universe have to do with the freedom that I feel subjectively? For that, we have to understand the universe. For that, we have to understand freedom and equilibrium. The universe was concentrated, or at the beginning of time, right? At the beginning of time, the entire universe was concentrated in an infinitely dense point of high energy, homogeneity, and order. This is a point of low entropy. Entropy is the measure of disorder. Right? So at the beginning of time, the universe was very orderly, high amount of energy, infinitely dense, and orderly. Then it exploded. So it's like that point was the beginning of time, and entropy is how time progresses, what time is, right? So then it exploded, and as the Big Bang continues, the universe tends towards increasing randomness or disorder or chaos or high entropy and low energy. So the beginning of the universe, high amount of energy and a lot of order. It was orderly. Then and it becomes disorderly, right? It becomes random. So it goes from a point of order to chaos. So the universe started out hot, homogeneous, and boring, and at the end it will become cold, homogeneous, and boring. And when energy has finally been evenly distributed in the closed system of the universe, or when it's been evenly distributed, equilibrium is reached. This is a point where there is no pressure to change, and only the random motion of particles remain. There is essentially random movement of particles in an overall non-moving system. And I think it's also that even those particles get split and even further, and even Brownian motion might not exist. I don't know. Now we are currently in between the beginning and end, the complex part of the simple direction of the universe, the formation of galaxies, stars, and solar systems is part of the process of moving towards high entropy or disorder, chaos. Stars will burn out and black holes will evaporate. Our sun attempts to dissipate energy and does its duty to the universe by making use of the energy stored in hydrogen atoms and distributes it to its surroundings. See, the sun is a byproduct of this universe expanding. It's like a swirl, like when you push. Oh, it's very hard to explain that part, but it's like it's something, because you'd assume, why should the sun be so orderly if everything is going towards chaos? Because in the attempt of the universe to go towards chaos, it almost employs certain things, right? It employs certain things, like for example, the sun, right? The sun is employed to break down each hydrogen atom to create even more chaos. So it's almost, you create order, an orderly, like the universe creates an orderly substance like the sun in order to perpetuate the desire for disorder. So it creates order, right, in the form of a sun, so that it breaks those hydrogen atoms, hydrogen molecules, and dissipates energy even more chaos, right? The low entropy, high energy, ultraviolet rays emitted by the sun are absorbed by plants and trees, and I think phytoplanktons in the ocean, and is used in the process of photosynthesis to convert it into sugars. Now, what does that mean? So ultraviolet ray, GXUIMR, it's higher up. It has its frequencies. I think its wavelength is smaller, so its frequency is higher, so the energy is a lot higher. So it packs a lot more energy. It's a high energy light. So it's high energy, but when it hits the plants and trees using photosynthesis convert this high energy, and it converts it into sugars, which is also order, but it also emits out an infrared heat glow. Infrared is lower energy. I think it's a lower frequency. So it takes high energy and it converts it into low energy. So that heat glow that when you use those goggles, night vision, the heat glow, that's infrared. The plants essentially take in order from the outside to maintain its internal order and emits chaos. Life is low entropy because it is capable of maintaining its order by absorbing order from its surroundings and emitting chaos. Life acts to reduce its own internal entropy by increasing the entropy of its surroundings, taking the high ordered energy of the outside to satisfy the cold of the in. But life began much before plants in the oceans, where there was an energy gradient and the desire for equilibrium in deep sea vents. See, at the beginning, how evolution had, at least the proposal, not the proposal, it's that evolution began deep in the oceans, in these deep sea vents. So I think when the tectonic plates, something to do with tectonic plates, I don't know, but there are deep sea vents where I think volcanic ashes from inside, all the chemicals from inside, deep inside the earth, they rush out with a lot of heat. And because it's high energy, right? Because it's high energy and a lot of chemicals, and because the rest of the ocean is lower energy, it like a hot cup of the energy goes to the outside. Same way, this high energy started forming complex bonds, chemical bonds, in order to distribute that energy, right? So there was an energy gradient between high energy and the rest of the ocean, which is lower energy. So it has to go from high to low. But how does it go high? So some of that energy gets distributed into chemical bonds as simple molecules start to form from random particles. I think a couple of particles in a particular experiment that was done to simulate how life began. But the proposal for that was that life began in a hot soup of chemicals. And this is similar in some sense. Hot soup in some sense. There's a lot of heat and there's an energy gradient. So chemical bonds are formed as simple molecules form to take away that excess energy. And then more complex molecules start to form to distribute energy more equally. However, thermal equilibrium cannot be reached because it's flowing into a reservoir, a deep reservoir like the entire ocean. And then on top of that, there is the sun. So there was in the bottom, there's heat, energy that needs to be distributed. On top of that, there is the sun. The sun is also creating energy, distributing energy to us through plants. So the energy of the sun also has to be dissipated, and the search for equilibrium continues, right? Equilibrium, what is equilibrium? Getting from a point of that high energy to low energy and making sure that both are equal in that sense. But it can't be equal because there's still more energy and has to keep being distributed. Evolution took place as molecules combined to form more complex ones to distribute that energy more evenly, right? In the oceans, it kept occurring from the ocean till us, constantly evolving in order to maintain equilibrium between the closed system of their bodies and the environment around it, maintaining homeostasis. Whatever new environment an organism enters, it becomes part of a closed system, right? This room, for example, is a closed system. Let's assume it's a closed, and I'm part of that closed system. I, as an entity, am open because things can affect me and I can affect it, but the whole thing is closed. Okay? Whatever new environment it goes inside, let's assume it's a closed system, but it as an entity is open. Since our ancestors till Luca, our last universal common ancestor, could not change the environment around it, it had to adapt. It had to adapt to the new environment, and that is how it attempted to maintain equilibrium as the species evolved to fit into the new environment. Now, if, for example, so that idea that we evolved, right, from whatever fish and crustaceans or something like that, I don't know how the tree of evolution branches out, but whatever path we've taken, so whatever path we've taken down that tree of evolution, right, every time it goes to the next stage, for example, it's almost as though it's distributing more energy. It's constantly attempting to distribute more energy more evenly. So we become more and more complex. Look at we're higher up, more and more complex, right? But why complex? Because when we're more and more complex, it's like the sun at the beginning, right? The sun, why, if everything is going towards a disorder, why should complexity arise? Because these complexity, it helps to convert more energy. It helps to convert more energy and distribute and create more chaos. It's like packets of order is created to create more chaos. It's like little minions. So we become more and more complex, right? Because one, the equilibrium has to be maintained, so more complex molecules are formed, and at the same time, because we're more complex, we end up doing more, we end up using more energy and things like that, and creating more things in different ways, right? So if the assumption would be then is, if, because we're still searching for equilibrium, we're constantly searching for equilibrium, what if you could be in equilibrium with the surroundings, when you're no longer searching for it, where our internal ordered low entropy is maintained perfectly, we will feel free. In that same manner, in meditation, for example, you go deeper and deeper, rejecting identification with the body and mind, saying neti neti, not this, not this, to every idea that I am the sound that I hear, the air that I smell, the thoughts that I have. Rejecting all of such things, you end up reducing the number of factors, like I said before, that are required to be in equilibrium. Like a chemistry experiment with few variables, equilibrium is less complex to attain, and you come to a point where there is no pressure to change. And so then that idea that there is no pressure to change, right, they're no longer desiring equilibrium, you're there in equilibrium, There is non-movement in the chemistry experiment. Therefore, equilibrium is freedom. Now that freedom is hopefully understood, what is meaning and purpose? I would say, by the definition of the universe, meaning is entropy and purpose is equilibrium. Meaning is looking back at the universe that has expanded till now, till me, till you. Meaning is the pattern or the science of life. If I jumped off a cliff tomorrow, I would fall and die. But if a bird jumped off a cliff, it would probably fly. Evolution or the pattern or the science of life decided that I should have big brains and make skyscrapers and birds should fly. Whatever has been set in motion since time till now, till you, till me, and the pattern like a computer code that was entropy, or the desire to go from a point of high energy to a point of low energy, from order to chaos, that is meaning. Your personality, your character, the different attributes that make you who you are. Maybe you sing, you dance, maybe you write, you read, maybe you like science, maybe you like art. The things that you do because of who you are is your contribution to entropy, and hence the meaning of your life. It's like how the sun, it dissipates energy by breaking down hydrogen atoms, molecules. In the same manner, you as an entity, even the plants, right, dissipate energy, infrared heat, glow. Same way, you do the same thing. All the different things that you do is almost a contribution to the universe or God. God is the universe. It's like everything that we do, and there's another thing, the entire economy is built towards increasing entropy. Think about all the fossil fuels that we burn. Why? Because we want more things. It's almost as though God is the greatest capitalist of all time. Crazy. But yeah, so meaning is essentially what has been set in motion till now, till you, till me. Whatever has been set in motion is meaning, right? There are certain constraints to such meaning. It's not a postmodernist world. I can't become a chair tomorrow, a table the next day. No. If I jumped off a cliff, I wouldn't fly. I can think and dream as much as I'd like to fly, but I wouldn't. Because there are certain things that are constrained by meaning. But what is purpose? Purpose is outward. Meaning is what has happened in the past till here and now. Purpose, on the other hand, is outward. It is the expanding universe. It is a universe that is yet to come. Purpose is the art of life. Meaning is the science of life. Purpose, it is searching for equilibrium, and not equilibrium itself. When it reaches equilibrium, everything disappears. Therefore, meaning in life is the stick hitting you from behind, and purpose is the carrot that you chase in front of you. Right? You chase equilibrium, and entropy is hitting you from behind. Right? Entropy is the meaning. Equilibrium is the desire, the purpose. Therefore, meaning in life is a stick hitting you from behind, and purpose is the carrot that you chase in front of you. Only when both meaning and purpose, the carrot and the stick, the push and the pull, disappear from life, can there truly exist freedom. Only in equilibrium, when that final goal is achieved, when equilibrium is achieved, the dualities of life disappear. Maya, that illusion, disappears. And where the carrot and the stick no longer exists, pure consciousness or ultimate reality exists. No longer pulled, no longer pushed, only existing, always free. It is understood why at equilibrium, hopefully it's understood that at equilibrium, the two ends of push and pull disappear. Because it's equilibrium. The game's over. Right? And understandably, the entire universe will collapse again and the game restarts. it expands again. But at that point, say t0, right, when it's completely spread out, I would suspect that it is pure consciousness. But why consciousness? Because if you were to assume that consciousness was that one entity that became many, when evenly spread out, it becomes back to that one entity, right? And that's it. Anyways, like, comment, and subscribe for more. Thinking Clown.